It's a beautiful day in this neighborhood, a beautiful day for a neighbor. Would you be mine? Could you be mine? It's a neighborly day in this beauty wood, a neighborly day for a beauty. Would you be mine? Could you be mine? I have always wanted to have a neighbor just like you. I've always wanted to live in a neighborhood with you, so let's make the most of this beautiful day. Since we're together, might as well say, would you be mine? Could you be mine? Won't you be my neighbor? Won't you please? Won't you please? Please won't you be my neighbor?
Won't you please be my neighbor indeed? We're continuing on the sermon series, Would You Be My Neighbor, today with the message to embrace your neighbor. And I'm thinking about, what embrace means and whatnot. And as I was watching the fight last night, I saw a lot of embracing going on. No, it's not the kind of embracing that we're going to be talking about today. But when you hear the word embrace, what do you think of? Hugs, exactly. We talked about that in the children's message, actually. And when I think of embrace in the terms of hugs, I think of my mom. My mom's a really hardworking woman. She is a stay-at-home mom, recently retired that as her last kid just went off to college. But she was one of those stay-at-home moms that always seemed to have some type of work to do. She got really involved in the church. She played a lot of tennis. She was always running errands, running to and fro. And whatever she did with all of her heart. She did it passionately. And a lot of times, that left her really worn out at the end of the day. And so, me, as I grew older, I kind of understood that, moms gets tired at the end of the day. And so occasionally we would just hug at the end of the day when I got home from school, and now when I come back from vacations, we can kind of sense each other when we just need a hug. And so we spend time just in the kitchen or wherever, just holding one another in an embrace. And it's something that's special in between my mom and I, and what I think of when I think of embrace. Because it just is a warming, comforting feeling to be held like that and to hold my mom. So you might be thinking, okay, well, that's neat, but where is he going with this? Are we just going to be told to go hug everybody around us? Well, if you're a hugger, maybe that's for you. But there's a second definition to embrace when you Google it. And that is to accept or support willingly and enthusiastically. And accept or support typically means a belief, a theory, or a change, or something like that. And as a college student, I'm really familiar with this idea of embrace as well, because so many people around me are constantly trying to get their ideas, their theories, their reports embraced, accepted by the professors. A lot of people are trying to get support. I have my roommate is a biochem major doing all types of research and stuff, and he's constantly writing grants and proposals for support for his research. But not just in the world of academia are people looking for someone to embrace their ideas. All across college, you've got students looking to be accepted for who they are. Sorority recruitment is going on around the campus right now, and I can't help but think as all the girls, march from house to house, they're just waiting to be accepted by someone, by some house. And you see this type of desire for acceptance all across our nation right now. I mean, people, just turn on the TV, you see people rioting to be accepted. People desperately want this type of embrace to be accepted or supported, willingly and enthusiastically. Because every person, each and every one of us, has a desire to be embraced, both to be held physically and emotionally, as well as to be accepted and supported. And as Christians, we're so blessed because we serve a God who holds us. We serve a God who accepts us and supports us in all that we do. But why is it when we who feel this satisfaction of God's embrace so often fail to embrace those around us? And you're thinking, what do you mean? Of course we're embracing everyone around us, right? We think about this summer. We just had this day of service where we went out all across Brookston and served the community, handing out coupons for groceries and praying for people and cleaning up the railroad tracks. We just had that awesome block party. So many people came out and we were serving our neighbors by hosting this block party. Our leadership team, they're having great conversation on how to bring new people into church. We absolutely serve this community. And all those things are great and wonderful things, signs of a healthy church, and should be continued. But what I'm talking about today is something a little bit different than acts of service, random acts of kindness, or inviting people. I'm talking about embracing others. And what I mean by embracing others is something that requires relationship. And that relationship requires time and investment. And unfortunately, the church has developed somewhat, not this church specifically, but the church grander has developed some sort of a reputation for not embracing others in this way. If you are involved in campus or been around campus at all, you'll know that preachers very often come onto campus. And if you know what I'm talking about, you're already starting to like roll your eyes and sigh because it seems like they come onto campus almost every day these days. And they stand at one of the most trafficked areas of campus on some type of thing, and they scream at people around them. They scream, "You're going to hell. Turn and repent. All of you are sinners." And they speak with great conviction, but they speak without understanding the harm that they are causing the people that they're speaking to, and the harm they're causing to the church. Because those preachers are a drastic example. We have developed this idea as a society that church, that Christianity, is this place where it's all about making ourselves better, getting better, doing things better, instead of embracing and accepting as God embraces and accepts us. So how can we act differently? How can we work against that reputation and embrace and love the people around us? And to learn about that, we're going to be looking at the story of Zacchaeus in Luke chapter 19. Now, if you're like me, by the time I got to high school, I was almost tired of hearing the story of Zacchaeus. I mean, I'd heard it so many times, over and over again. Anytime someone said they were preaching on Zacchaeus, I rolled my eyes. I was like, oh my gosh. But as I read it in context with this message, I learned something new. And I want to encourage all of you all, and any time that there's passages that you've read over and over again, continue to read them and to seek what God might be speaking to you in that. And so I'll begin in chapter 19, verse 1. Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through. A man there by the name of Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector. Now I'll stop there. There's our first element of background knowledge on Zacchaeus. He's a chief tax collector. And if anyone's familiar with this story at all, you'll know that tax collectors weren't really, the most favorite people in the society at the time. In fact, they were very much disliked by everyone around. I mean, imagine if the IRS had agents that came and took your taxes from your income. They probably wouldn't be your favorite people either. But in this community, in this time, it meant a little bit more than that, because it was taxes by the Roman government. And the Jews thought that the tax, that they shouldn't have to pay that, and that it wasn't right. And not only that, they thought the tax collectors were equal to sinners. As we will read later in this passage and throughout the Gospel of Luke, Luke communicates that a tax collector is basically synonymous with a sinner. And so Zacchaeus would have been a man, as a chief tax collector, who would have not only been disliked by everyone in his community, he would have been alienated and called unclean. And he would have been separated from his entire community of Jews. Now, I'll read on that Zacchaeus was also wealthy. In fact, he was so wealthy that at the end of this story, he gives half of all of his possessions and wealth to the poor and pledges that he will give 4 times the amount of anything that he has wronged people. So we know Zacchaeus is well off, right? He has all of the worldly possessions that he might possibly need. In fact, maybe enough to overcome his loneliness of being alienated by his community. And so we'll read on. Verse 3 says, he wanted to see who Jesus was, but being a short man, he could not because of the crowd. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore fig tree to see him, since Jesus was coming that way. Our third piece of information about Zacchaeus: he wanted to see Jesus. Why did he want to see Jesus? Most of the interactions that Jesus has had throughout the gospel were with the poor, the sick, the possessed, the crippled or the lame. But Zacchaeus wasn't poor, we know that. He wasn't sick, he wasn't possessed, he didn't have any type of disability. Jesus also spoke with a rich man just before this in chapter 18, in which he asked the rich man to give up all his possessions. But as we read, Zacchaeus seems to be okay with giving up his possessions. So why is it that Zacchaeus wants to see Jesus? And not alone he wants to see Jesus, he wants to see Jesus so bad that when he realizes he is not tall enough, he runs to the nearest tree and climbs to the top of it. I mean, get this picture in your head. There's this a crowd around this, and one of the most wealthiest men in the community ends up running up a tree in order to see this man named Jesus. What's going on here? You see, everyone needs God to fill one thing or another in their hearts. And for Zacchaeus, he needed to feel embraced again. He needed Jesus' love. He needed Jesus' acceptance and support in his life. And today's times are not too far off from what Zacchaeus felt like he needed. There are people all around us, I know, especially on campus, but I'm sure here in Brookston as well, who are craving embrace the way Zacchaeus was. And so what can we do about it? And to answer that question, let's take a look at how Jesus responded to Zacchaeus' desperation. In verse 5, when Jesus reached the spot, he looked up and said to him, Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today. So he came down at once and welcomed him gladly. All the people saw this and they began to mutter, has he gone to be at the guest of a sinner? But Zacchaeus stood up and said to the Lord, look, Lord, here and now I give half of my possessions to the poor, and if I have cheated anybody out of anything, I will pay them back 4 times the amount. Jesus said to him, Today salvation has come to this house because this man, too, is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man has come to seek and to save what was lost. So you're telling me that to save our neighbors, to bring them to salvation, all we have to do is invite ourselves over to their house? I mean, that's what it seems like, right? No, that's not really the point. You see, Jesus, with the possessed, he drove out those demons. With the sick and the lame, he provided healing and comfort. To the rich, he gave them a lesson. But with Zacchaeus, he recognized something was a little different than all of those other experiences. Jesus understood what Zacchaeus really needed. And this is the first step in embracing our neighbors, is to understand what they need. Jesus knew that Zacchaeus desired to be welcomed. Jesus knew that Zacchaeus desired to be embraced, and that's because God is omniscient, and Jesus is God. And so Jesus automatically knew this. But for us, understanding others' needs isn't so simple. When we try to help others, it's easy to come to quick judgments as to what people really need. Oh, this person just needs this. Or we come across a homeless person. Oh, they just need a hot meal. But sometimes if you sit down and you take the time to talk to that person, there might be something else going on underneath those layers. And understanding takes that time. It takes time. It takes listening to what the other person has to say. I struggle with that a lot with listening, because as soon as people are talking and I get an idea, I'm like, oh, yep, this is what I've got for it. This is what my opinion on that. But we have to hold off those opinions and really listen to their stories. And it takes prayer, because God is omniscient. God does know. And we must be connected to Him. The next part of embracing, once you've understood the need of your neighbor, is to step into their world. That's what Jesus is doing when He's inviting Himself over. He's not being rude. He's not saying, hey, Zacchaeus, make me a sandwich. I'm hungry. Jesus is telling Zacchaeus, I want to be with you this evening. I want to be where you are. I want to be in your life. I want to be with you in your struggle. I right now am part of a fraternity type thing called Fairway Cooperative on Purdue's campus, and my position at the cooperative is pledge captain. And so just the other day I was going through kind of like a teaching process for all the guys in the house who want to be big bros of the pledges in the house. And as I was teaching them, I was looking through kind of the manual of some of the material that all pledge captains should work with the big bros on. And the very first point said, love your way into their world. And I thought that was huge. I thought that one point, I could have said that and just been done with the whole lesson. Because I think that there is so much we can draw from that point, to love your way into their world. It's easy to love them into our world, to bring them into our world, our circumstances. But it's difficult and much more loving to love your way into their world, to bring yourself into their circumstances, to hurt when they hurt, to see things the way they see them. So there's these two simple steps: to understand someone's need and to enter into their world. These are the steps, just 2 steps to embracing someone, and they're a whole lot easier said than they are done. They're so difficult because they're more than random acts of kindness. They're more than a service project or a short little mission trip. They require relationship, they require time, and they require investment. Recently, I've been in conversations with a missionary organization called Missionary Aviation Fellowship. As you can see, I am a pilot and stuff, and so I've kind of been looking at what they do. And as I was talking to one of their representatives on the phone, I said, how long do most of your missionaries stay in the field? And they said, well, Nathan, we really want our missionaries to develop relationships with the communities that they serve. We want to give them a good amount of time for them to build that relationship with all the people in that community. And so because of that, we typically encourage all of the incoming missionaries to stay for at least 8 or 10 years in the places that they serve. 8 or 10 years to develop relationships. Now, granted, this is people going to different corners of the globe and different cultures that are unfamiliar to them. But my point is this, is that relationships, embracing others, it doesn't come like that. It takes time. It takes patience. It takes understanding. The other thing that embracing others takes is it takes investment. When I think of investment, I think of stocks, right? We invest our money into different stocks, different products, different businesses, and we pay attention to how those stocks and businesses do. If I were to invest $100 in Apple, I would, watch Apple's products, see when they're releasing the next iPhone, be aware of what's going on in the organization, when someone's fired, when all this is happening. I would get excited when the price of the stock rises. I would get upset and frustrated when the price of the stock lowers. And it's a similar connection when you invest in others. You're to invest emotionally in the people that you embrace in a way that when they hurt, you hurt. When they are growing in their relationship with Christ, you celebrate. Like the Bible says, the angels celebrate in heaven whenever someone comes to know God. You are to celebrate with them because you've invested your emotions and your heart in who they are. Relationship and investment are key components of embracing someone else. And if we all took the time to develop relationships with our neighbors in order to understand where they are, and then we emotionally invested them by loving our way into their world, we have the power to bring great healing to a world that so strongly desires to be embraced. We watched a clip before this sermon of Mr. Rogers. If it makes you feel any older, I can barely remember Mr. Rogers. And in the intro, Mr. Rogers takes off his jacket and he puts on a cardigan, right? A zip-up sweater. He takes off his business shoes and he puts on tennis shoes. Why does he do that? There have been a lot of studies about why Mr. Rogers did this at the beginning of every episode. Maybe to bring familiarity with parents coming home for the children, viewers, and things like that. But most studies say that it is to communicate to the children, to the audience, that Mr. Rogers is taking time. He's leaving his business world behind him to sit down and to spend that time with his audience, with his neighbors across the television monitor. That is what embracing looks like. To take the time and to be with the people in our world, to be with our neighbors. So let's go out into the world today and show people around us that we are here for them. Let's embrace them by metaphorically putting on our cardigan sweaters and our tennis shoes and sit down and break bread with our neighbors. And so before we sing our last hymn, it's time for the tip of the week. And this is something we're doing every week leading up to Invite Your Friend to Church Day, which I believe is September 17th, right after the Popcorn Apple Festival. And for that, my tip of the week for you all is this: to tithe your time. And here's what I mean by that. Each week or regularly or however it may be, you all are used to tithing some part of your income to the church, to give a percentage of what you earn. And so my tip for you is to give a portion of your week, of your time, to your neighbors. It's easy to think of who our neighbors might be, and so you might be thinking of them now. So block off a certain amount of time that you just want to give to them, not for your own benefit, but for theirs. Maybe it's 30 minutes, maybe it's an hour, just a little bit of your day investing in them. Because when we regularly give our time to enter into someone else's life, it becomes a whole lot easier to invite them to share an hour with you at church.